A death is indicated. There was once a dervish who had 60 disciples. He had taught them as well as he could, and the time had come to undergo a new experience. He called the disciples together and said, "We must now go on a long journey. Something, I am not sure what, will happen on the way. Those of you who have absorbed enough to enter this stage will be able to accompany me. But first, you must all memorize this phrase: I must die instead of the dervish. Be prepared to shout this out at any time, whenever I raise both my arms." Some of the disciples started muttering among themselves, now highly suspicious of the dervish's motives. No fewer than 59 of the 60 deserted him, saying, "He knows that he will be in danger at some time, and is preparing to sacrifice us instead of himself." They said to him, "You may even be planning some crime, perhaps even a murder. We can never follow you on terms like that." The dervish and his sole remaining companion started the journey. Now a most terrible and unjust tyrant had seized the next city shortly before they entered it. He wanted to consolidate his rule with a dramatic act of force and called his soldiery together. He said to them, "Capture some wayfarer of meek aspect and bring him for judgment in the public square. I propose to sentence him as a miscreant." The soldiers said, "We hear and obey," went into the streets and pounced upon the first travelling stranger they met. He happened to be the disciple of the dervish. The dervish followed the soldiers to the place where the king sat, while all the citizenry, hearing the drums of death and already trembling with fear, collected around. The disciple was thrown down in front of the throne, and the king said, "I have resolved to make an example of a vagabond, to show the people that we will not tolerate unconformity or attempted escape. You are to die at once." At this the dervish called out in a loud voice, "Accept my life, O mighty monarch, instead of the life of this useless youth. I am more blameworthy than he, for it was I who induced him to embark upon a life of wandering." At this point he raised both arms above his head, and the disciple cried out, "Munificent king, please allow me to die. I must die instead of the dervish." The king was quite amazed. He said to his counselors, "What kind of people are these, vying with one another to taste death? If this is heroism, will it not inflame the people against me? Advise me as to what to do." The councillors conferred for a few moments. Then they said, "Peacock of the age, if this is heroism, there is little that we can do about it, except to act more viciously until people lose heart. But we have nothing to lose if we ask this dervish why he is anxious to die." When he was asked, the dervish replied, "Imperial Majesty, it has been foretold that a man will die this day in this place, and that he shall rise again and therefore be immortal. Naturally, both I and my disciple want to be that man." The king thought, "Why should I make others immortal, when I myself am not?" After a moment's reflection, he gave orders that he should be executed immediately instead of the wanderers. Then the worst of the king's evil accomplices, eager for immortality, killed themselves. None of them rose again, and the dervish and his disciple went their way during the confusion. Ordinary. Rashid Satarazad received a party of intending students whose heads were filled with his wonders and the excitement of arriving so near to the source of the teaching. He said, "Let one of you be your spokesman, and let him tell me of your feelings." One of the visitors stepped forward and said, "We are stimulated by the presence, and eager for the knowledge, and elevated by the tradition." Rashid said, "That is a truthful account of your feelings. Because you all love the exciting, I shall have to give you the banal. You are to learn through life. And life, the key to knowledge, is the most banal of all things. You will have to undergo experiences which will make you understand life, not make it more interesting. One of those present exclaimed, "That man whom you ask to represent us speaks for himself, and yet we must all be judged by his behaviour." Rashid said, "He may think that he speaks for all of you. You may think that he speaks only for himself. But it is I who have agreed that he speaks for all. Are you already disputing my authority? To do so shows that you crave excitement and verifies the words which you are trying to refute." Bravery. A certain widely read and energetic man went to the Hakim Husseini and said, "I do not ask for myself, but I am sure that if you were me and met my friend Dilawar, you would realize that he is nothing less than a Sufi, and that you would welcome him and make him a sharer in your investigations and a partner in your studies, and would revel in his delightful presence." The Hakim said, "I do indeed admire your bravery, Dilawari, for I have myself never been able to recognize a Sufi in such a manner as you have. Because my circle is proceeding on different assumptions, to welcome Dilawar might be a delight, but it would also mean dealing with him alone, for none of my companions is able to associate with such a man. The journey to adulthood begins with infancy, and if you have a class of infants and you know what their destination will be, this does not mean that you can take on a single extra student who in any case would need the association of an entire class of his contemporaries to enable him to make the requisite progress." A Disciple of Haidar. Haidar heard a disciple say, "I am glad that I did not buy such and such a book, for now I have arrived at the source of its knowledge, I have saved myself pain and needless expense." After a year, Haidar handed him a book, saying, "You have served me for 12 months. The value of your labour has been 100 dirhams. That is the cost of this book. You would not have paid 100 silver pieces for such an inanimate object as a book, and few people would do so. But you have been made to pay for it by me, and here it is. A camel is dear at a penny if you do not need a camel. A single word is cheap at 1,000 gold pieces if it is essential to you. If you wish to return to the source of being, you will always have to take the first step, even though you may be demanding to be allowed to take the 100th step." The Most Great Name. A fakir in India asked a Sufi whether he would tell him the most great name, the 100th name of Allah. Those who know it can perform miracles, altering the course of life and of history. None may know it until he is worthy. The Sufi said, "In accordance with tradition, I must first give you the test which will show your capacity. You shall go to the gate of this city and remain there until nightfall, returning to me then to describe something which you will have witnessed." The fakir eagerly did as he was told. After nightfall he came back and gave his report to the sage in these terms. "As instructed, I positioned myself at the city gate in a condition of alertness. The incident which most impressed me during the day concerned an old man. He wanted to enter our city with a huge load of firewood on his back. The gatekeeper insisted on his paying a tax on the value of his goods. The old man, being penniless, asked that he might be allowed to sell his wood first. Realizing that he was friendless and helpless, the gatekeeper forced him to hand over his wood, which he stole for himself. The old man was driven away with cruel blows." The Sufi said, "What were your feelings when you saw this?" The fakir answered, "I desired even more strongly to know the most great name. Had I known it, the case would have been different for that unfortunate and innocent woodcutter." The Sufi said, "O man born to attain felicity, I myself learned the 100th name from my own master after he had tested my resolution and ascertained whether I was an impulsive emotionalist or a servant of man, and after he had subjected me to experiences which would allow me to see my own thoughts and conduct. The 100th name is for the service of all mankind, all the time. My master was none other than the woodcutter whom you saw today by the city gate." The Book of Wisdom. Simab said, "I shall sell the Book of Wisdom for 100 gold pieces, and some people will say that it is cheap." Yunus Mama said to him, "And I shall give away the key to understanding it, and almost none shall take it, even free of charge." Kadudar and the Pilgrimage. A certain Kalandar fell in with the sage Kadudar and asked him the question which had been puzzling him for many years. "Why do you forbid your followers to make the pilgrimage? How can man forbid what has been commanded from on high?" Kadudar, whose name means possessor of the gourd, held up a dried gourd and said, "Can you forbid this pumpkin to be a pumpkin? Nobody can forbid the fulfilling of a celestial command, so that even if a man appeared to do so, in reality it would be impossible. The duty of the guide, however, is to ensure that pilgrimages are not performed by people in an unsuitable inner state, just as the guardians of the sanctuary will prevent anyone from carrying out the pilgrimage rites in an unsuitable outward state. All pilgrimage has an outward and an inward aspect. The ordinary man will help the pilgrim when he needs money or food, and will raise him up if he has collapsed on the road. The man of the path, minutely discerning similar necessities in the inner life, is compelled to give his aid in his own way.